Her son raised his beer and said, "You smell like a problem," loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Elaine Holloway, soft-spoken and 70, didn't break stride. By Monday, the utilities would be cut, the house sold, and the trust rewritten. Trent had laughed at her peach pie. He wouldn't laugh at escrow. He thought she'd die before she stopped helping. Instead, she lived long enough to evict him with a smile. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The afternoon sun poured golden warmth over the backyard, where balloons tugged at their strings and paper lanterns swayed gently in the breeze. A portable speaker hummed with upbeat 80s hits. Folding chairs circled the lawn like sentinels, and platters of wings, chips, and sheet cake covered 2 long tables under the pop-up canopy. Laughter spiked from various corners, neighbors swapping gossip, kids racing near the garden hose, someone starting a cornhole match near the fence. Elaine stepped through the side gate, her gray curls still damp at the ends. She carried 2 glass pie dishes wrapped in kitchen towels, peach crumble and buttermilk chess, both still faintly warm. She wore her soft lavender blouse, the one with the pearl buttons, and white slacks that hadn't seen daylight in a year. She'd taken her time getting ready, not out of vanity, but intention. It was her son's birthday, after all. She smiled when she spotted him near the grill, beer in hand, laughing with 2 men in polos and Ashley perched nearby in wedge sandals. "Look who finally made it," Trent called out, grinning. Elaine smiled, a little breathless from the walk. "Traffic on Oak was—" Trent cut her off, turning to the group. "You smell like a problem, Mom." The world paused. For a heartbeat there was silence, a vacuum of comprehension, and then it cracked open. Laughter burst from the group like shattering glass. One of the guys slapped Trent on the back. Ashley leaned forward, head tilted, howling. Even someone at the food table chuckled under their breath, unsure but swept up in the moment. Elaine stopped mid-step. She blinked slowly, as if her eyes needed time to catch up to her ears. She said nothing, just tightened her grip on the pies and walked past them, her heels crunching softly on the stone pavers. Inside, the kitchen buzzed with the low murmur of a blender and the sound of a toddler banging a plastic cup against the fridge. Elaine placed the pies on the edge of the counter, folding the towels slowly. She stood there for a long second, long enough for someone to notice. But no one did. She turned and made her way to the back patio, weaving through conversations that didn't pause for her. Nobody looked up. Not Ashley. Not Trent. Not even Lexi, her granddaughter who was kneeling on the lawn braiding another girl's hair. Elaine found an empty lawn chair near the far edge of the yard, half in shade. She lowered herself carefully into it, bones creaking quietly beneath her slacks, and looked out past the garden fence toward the street. A sprinkler clicked on somewhere, flinging arcs of water across the grass. Behind her, someone shouted, "You seeing this cornhole domination, Trent?" More laughter. Elaine folded her hands in her lap. Her fingers were cold. It wasn't the joke itself. It was the way it bloomed in the air, how quickly everyone chose to laugh, how easily she was marked as something absurd, a punchline, instead of a person. It wasn't new, not really, but it had never been this public, this raw. The peach pie was his favorite. She hadn't made it in years, not since before the mortgage scare, not since she'd taken out that second loan to help them cover IVF. From the corner of her eye, she saw Ashley twirl toward the drink table, still laughing. No one came to sit beside her. No one offered a plate, a drink, or even a glance. Elaine stared out at the children's plastic pool, half deflated, a sad yellow duck face peeling at the edge. The breeze shifted. A mix of barbecue smoke, citronella, and summer sweat carried through the yard. She pressed her tongue to the roof of her mouth. The sting of salt was there, yes, but she didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, and opened her recent calls. Her thumb hovered over one name for a moment, Carla W., estate attorney, and then tap. "Carla, I think I'm ready to make some changes." Monday morning arrived like a whispered dare, humid, overcast, with the kind of low-hanging clouds that made everything feel suspended. Elaine sat at the kitchen table with a mug of cooling chamomile and a yellow legal pad, each line of it untouched except for the first word she'd written in block letters: enough. Her phone buzzed just as the grandfather clock struck 9. Carla W., estate attorney. Elaine answered before the second ring. Elaine, came the calm, clipped voice on the other end. I reviewed the documents over the weekend. Yes, we can. Move forward. Your name's still the sole trustee on the deed. Trent was never added, regardless of what they assumed. Elaine pressed the pad flat with both palms. So, if I wanted to rearrange some things? Carla didn't hesitate. You can. Legally and privately. The house is yours to restructure, transfer, or sell. As for the occupants, Carla paused, choosing her words like chess pieces. If we issue a 3-day notice this Friday, they'll be out by Monday. Legally, cleanly. Elaine stared out the window. A squirrel darted across the back fence, tail twitching, vanishing between the ivy. I'll need to gather the paperwork, she said softly. Mortgage, utilities, title certificate. I'll email a checklist, Carla replied, and if you want me to update your trust documents, I can send over a revision draft today. Elaine's fingers tightened around her mug. Do it. By noon, she had pulled 3 banker's boxes from the hall closet, dusty and half collapsed, but still holding every piece of paperwork she'd spent decades filing, fearing she'd need them someday. That day, it seemed, had arrived. She moved methodically. No panic, just pages, files, folders, labels like HELOC 2017, Ashley IVF receipts, post-rehab budget. A history of her silence archived in ink. Upstairs, the hallway creaked. She paused at Trent and Ashley's bedroom door, not intending to eavesdrop, only to pass, but his voice cut through the wood like static. She's acting like she owns the place, he scoffed. You should have seen her yesterday, Ashley. That face, like she thought anyone gave a damn about her dumb pie. Elaine froze. A pause, then quieter. She's just mooching now. Guilt-renting, pretending she still needed. Ashley's voice murmured something Elaine couldn't make out. Laughter followed. Elaine stepped backward, carefully, each heel landing silently on the wood. She turned, walked down the stairs, and went straight to her small desk in the den. She opened the laptop, clicked the bookmarked folder labeled Legal and Property, and began uploading the trust file Carla had just emailed her. On the utility website, she moved without hesitation, setting the disconnection date for power, water, internet. Not immediate, not suspicious, just effective. Scheduled for Monday. She reached the final confirmation page and hovered over the button for a moment. Her thumb trembled, not from doubt, but from adrenaline. Click. It was like flipping the breaker on a past version of herself. She sat back, breathing slow, letting the silence in the room stretch and shift around her. On the bookshelf behind her, a family photo caught the light. Lexi at age 8, her arms wrapped tight around Elaine's neck. That summer, they'd spent every Saturday baking together while Ashley worked late and Trent slept through most mornings. Elaine reached up, took the photo frame gently, and placed it face down on the shelf. Her phone buzzed again. Carla W. Trust draft complete. Review attached. She opened the file. The first clause was already highlighted. Beneficiaries. All shares previously designated to Trent Holloway are hereby nullified pending this amendment. Elaine tapped the cursor into the signature field. She didn't sign yet. Not tonight. Instead, she stood, turned out the lamp, and let the room fall into dusk. In the darkness, her jaw unclenched for the first time in days. From upstairs, Trent laughed again, a careless, entitled burst of sound. Elaine walked into the hallway and looked up toward the staircase, where only shadows moved. She didn't speak. She simply smiled, because Friday was already on its way. Elaine sat cross-legged on the floor of the guest room, surrounded by piles of manila folders like ruins from a forgotten war. Sunlight slanted across the carpet, catching the fine dust in the air. She hadn't sat like this in years, knees creaking, joints stiff, heart too full to stand. A yellowing manila envelope labeled 1992. Benefits and bills slid open in her lap. Inside were stubby pay stubs from the nursing home, tattered receipts from the corner drugstore, and a hand-drawn budget on ruled paper in her late husband's handwriting. The last one, dated 3 weeks before the stroke, had circled mortgage and underlined Elaine's medication. Only one got paid that month. She ran her finger slowly over the handwriting, a ghost's touch. After Robert died, she hadn't had the luxury of grieving. Trent was 7, skinny, mop-haired, and angry in the way only a boy without answers could be. She had taken the graveyard shift at the gas station, then moonlighted as a home aide, napped in the pantry, skipped mammogram appointments, learned to live on black coffee and adrenaline. She had kept the house through sheer defiance. The roof leaked for 2 winters before she found a man who'd fix it for cash and soup. When Trent started acting out in high school, shoplifting, late-night calls from police, she told herself it was grief, not character. Not yet. He'd cleaned up in his 20s. For a while, she believed the worst had passed. But then came the oxy years. Rehab had cost her the last of her savings. Ashley came into the picture right around then, all sparkle and nervous smiles. Her engagement ring, bigger than Elaine's, had ever been. They were supposed to stay just a few months after the wedding. That was 4 years ago. Elaine pushed aside the folder and opened the trust binder. The legalese was sharp-edged, but she knew where to look now. Section 8B, Beneficiary Distribution, Trent Holloway, 50% of estate and property. She stared at the clause for a long time. She'd kept it that way through relapses, tantrums, and thinly veiled threats, even through the IVF treatments she helped fund. Just until Ashley's insurance kicks in, Mom. Through the rolling debt she'd silently taken on so they could keep their luxury SUV. Because some part of her still clung to the myth, he'll get it together. One day, he'll remember what I gave up. But Sunday had shown her something else. Not just the cruelty, but the ease of it. How natural it was for Trent to humiliate her. How familiar the laughter had sounded, like a shared language she no longer understood. Her hand moved before her mind could second-guess it. She reached into the drawer of the nearby file cabinet and pulled out a fresh tab divider and label maker. The click of the plastic label spool was oddly satisfying. Remove Trent, beneficiary update. She pressed the label onto the folder's tab and slid in a blank document sleeve. The folder snapped shut with a soft but final sound. Elaine sat back, breathing shallow. The air in the room felt thinner. From downstairs, she could hear Ashley on speakerphone, her shrill laughter bouncing off the kitchen tiles. Something about a brunch invite. Something about Elaine being moody again. Elaine reached for her laptop and opened the browser. The real estate tab was still open from the night before. She clicked on a saved listing she hadn't meant to save, an ocean view condo in Ventura, all windows and quiet light. 2 bedrooms, gated building, pet-friendly. Another window, her banking dashboard, the sale value of her current home, estimated by 3 separate sites, flashed at the top. More than enough. Her pulse thudded in her neck as she opened a blank email to Carla. Subject, revised strategy. Body, Carla, let's talk full sale, not just eviction. She stared at the cursor, then hit send. It was no longer just about getting them out. It was about burning the map so they'd never find their way back. And as the email disappeared into the digital void, Elaine stood slowly, brushing lint from her slacks, and whispered to herself, "They'll never see it coming." Elaine tapped her fingers on the armrest of the living room chair, waiting for the call to connect. Outside, wind chimes clinked against each other, soft and hollow. A cheery voice picked up on the second ring. Darla speaking. Elaine lowered her voice out of habit, as if the walls had grown ears. "It's Elaine Holloway. I think I'm ready to sell." A pause. Then, cautiously, Ready, or just looking to price shop again?" Elaine's voice didn't waver. "I want it quiet. No signs, no open house, and I need someone who's ready to move fast." "I've got an all-cash buyer," Darla said, the warmth returning instantly. "Investor type. He's already seen photos from the last time you almost listed. Still interested?" Elaine's mouth felt dry. She took a sip of cold tea. "What's his timeline?" "Pre-inspection by Thursday. Closing as soon as title clears. We could get the ball rolling by Friday morning if you sign tonight. Elaine didn't hesitate. "Email me everything." She hung up and stared across the room at the china cabinet, walnut with brass handles, Robert's grandmother's. The last time it had been moved, Lexi wasn't even born. She opened the cabinet slowly. The clink of porcelain on glass was louder than she remembered. Each dish, each figurine was a memory. Birthdays, holidays, years she now realized she'd spent in service of everyone but herself. She wrapped them, one by one, in butcher paper and tucked them into the first moving box. By Wednesday, 3 boxes were labeled and stacked neatly in the trunk of her Buick. She'd rented a small, climate-controlled storage unit under her maiden name. Every trip felt like she was emptying a chapter, wrapping, lifting, driving in silence, unlocking something only she understood. On Thursday morning, while Trent was at the office, "God, he's finally showing up for work," Ashley had muttered over breakfast. Elaine opened the door to a clean-cut inspector with a clipboard and a pressed blue shirt. "Elaine Holloway?" he asked. She nodded, stepping aside. Darla arrived shortly after, all efficiency and perfume. "The buyer's ready to submit the final offer pending today's walkthrough," she whispered, while the inspector checked the furnace in the crawlspace. "We're in motion." Elaine signed the pre-inspection forms with a pen that had once belonged to Robert. It left a tiny blue smudge on the signature line. She didn't bother wiping it. By Friday, Ashley had started to notice. Elaine was in the pantry, filling a small box with recipe cards, when Ashley leaned against the doorframe with a plastic tumbler in hand. "Hey, where'd the wedding china go?" Elaine didn't flinch. "Storage. I'm clearing space." Ashley's eyes narrowed. "Decluttering all of a sudden?" Elaine turned, the box in her arms. "It's been overdue, don't you think?" Ashley's smile didn't reach her eyes. "You're not planning to die on us, are you?" Elaine brushed past her without answering. That evening, she found Lexi curled up on the porch swing, a blanket around her shoulders, phone glowing in her hands. The sun had just dipped below the neighbor's roof, leaving everything in dusky pink. Elaine sat beside her, quietly. They swung for a few seconds in silence before Lexi spoke, eyes still on her screen. "You're moving stuff, I noticed." Elaine didn't lie. "Some things are better in storage." Lexi looked at her then, eyes wide and alert in a way Trent's had never been. "Are you okay?" Elaine reached for her hand, held it. "You like the beach?" she asked, her voice soft. Lexi shrugged. "I like waves. I like quiet." Elaine smiled. "Good." A long beat. Then, "That's good to know." Lexi didn't press. But later, when Elaine stood alone in the kitchen, rinsing the teacup Lexi had used, she noticed something folded beside the sink. A napkin. On it, in Lexi's handwriting, "Wherever you're going, save me a room." Elaine folded the napkin gently and slid it into the pocket of her robe, because the house wasn't the only thing she planned on taking with her. "They mocked me with plastic forks. I sealed their fate with bubble wrap." That thought flickered in Elaine's mind as she knelt beside the dining room hutch, rolling a thick sheet of padding around the final crystal decanter. The tape dispenser gave a satisfying ka-chuck as she sealed the box. She wrote, "Glass fragile," across the top in her tidy, looping hand. At the kitchen table, 2 movers in matching navy polos were sipping coffee she'd brewed fresh, no sugar. She told them it was a light pre-renovation haul, just some antiques, no heavy lifting. They didn't ask questions. She'd chosen the kind of crew who charged by the hour and minded their own business. One of them, the older guy with crow's feet, looked around as she slid another wrapped heirloom into a padded bin. "This house has good bones," he said. "You don't see trim work like this anymore." Elaine didn't look up. "No," she said. "You don't." By noon, the house was lighter. At least 5 rooms worth of memories gone, boxed and logged and gently driven off in the truck marked Seaside Storage Solutions. Elaine watched from the porch as the truck rolled down the hill and turned out of sight. Inside, the silence felt different. Not the emptiness of grief, but the stillness of something waiting to shift. By some miracle of poor timing and good luck, Trent and Ashley had scheduled themselves out of the house for the weekend. An executive couples retreat, an hour up the coast, complete with spa robes and poorly disguised MLM pitches. They'd left Friday afternoon. "You'll watch Murphy, right?" Ashley had asked, barely looking up from her phone as she hoisted the duffel bag into the car. Elaine had nodded. Of course. The dog was asleep in a pool of sun near the fireplace. Elaine gave him a scratch behind the ears as she passed, a quiet co-conspirator. That night, she walked through each room with a clipboard, checking drawers, closets, file cabinets. She gathered every document with her name on it: life insurance, utility statements, Robert's death certificate, Lexi's birth announcement. All of it went into a single accordion file, neatly ordered. She clipped it shut and placed it in her purse. Saturday morning dawned brittle and bright. Elaine logged into her utility accounts one last time. Her hands were steady as she clicked each final confirmation. Gas, disconnect Monday. Electric, disconnect Monday. Internet, disconnect Monday. Water, disconnect Monday. A low whoosh sounded outside. The mail carrier. Elaine slipped on her slippers and opened the door just in time to intercept a small stack. Among the usual junk and bills sat a manila envelope from Carla's office, closing documents, final signatures enclosed. She set it on the kitchen counter and made herself a cup of tea, Earl Grey, strong. At the table she read each page slowly, like a sermon. Darla had done her job well. The sale was airtight. The buyer would take possession Monday by 4 p.m. Funds would hit her account the same day. She took out the pen, the same one she'd used to sign her marriage license in 1979, and placed her signature on the dotted line. When she was done, she exhaled and turned the final page. Underneath it, tucked like a bookmark, was the template Carla had sent earlier in the week. 3-day notice to vacate, due to termination of tenancy. Elaine printed 2 clean copies from the den. She folded each carefully, pressed them flat, and slid them into matching white envelopes. One addressed to Trent Holloway, one to Ashley Holloway. On the front of each, in blue ink, she wrote, "To be opened Sunday evening." She set them in the drawer beside the fridge, next to the takeout menus and expired coupons. Outside, the wind was picking up. The big maple tree in the yard rattled its leaves against the window like someone trying to get her attention. But Elaine didn't look. She was staring at the floor, at a single fork left on the tile, plastic and used, probably from yesterday. She picked it up, snapped it clean in half, dropped both pieces in the trash. Upstairs, her phone vibrated on the nightstand. A message from Ashley. "Retreat's great, might stay an extra night. Hope the dog's not too much." Elaine smiled without humor. "He's quieter than both of you combined." She turned off the phone and returned to the dining room, where the walls were finally bare, the echoes finally honest. She stood in the middle of the room, her eyes drifting to the ceiling, then closed them. Because in 36 hours, this house would no longer be hers. And neither would they. The roast chicken smelled like something out of a magazine, golden skin, sprigs of rosemary tucked neatly along the sides, carrots caramelized just enough to glisten in the casserole dish. Elaine plated everything with care, not for them, for herself. This was her last meal in the house, and she refused to let it taste like regret. Trent lumbered in first, still in joggers and a stretched-out t-shirt that read, "World's okayest husband." He slumped into his chair with the grace of a falling tree, thumbs already scrolling through his phone. Ashley followed, barefoot and half damp from her 3rd bath of the day. "Ugh," she groaned, rubbing her temple. "Wi-Fi's been spotty since last night. I swear we pay for fiber and get hamster wheel speed." Elaine smiled faintly as she set a bowl of mashed potatoes on the table. "Must be a service issue." Ashley flopped into her chair. "It better not mess with my Zoom tomorrow." Elaine didn't respond. Instead, she walked back to the kitchen counter, opened the drawer beside the fridge, and took out 2 crisp white envelopes. No dramatic flair, just a quiet, methodical movement, like she was fetching napkins. She returned to the table and placed one envelope beside Trent's plate, the other beside Ashley's. Trent looked up, blinking. "What's this? Coupons?" Elaine sat down across from them and folded her hands in her lap. "Dinner first?" Ashley asked, poking at the chicken. "Or are we playing Secret Santa?" Elaine's gaze was steady. "Open them." They did. Trent tore his open one-handed, still chewing. Ashley unfolded hers slowly, brow furrowing with each line. Trent was the first to speak. "What the hell is this?" Elaine's voice was soft, clear. It's your eviction notice. Ashley's chair scraped back slightly. Wait, what? Elaine turned to her. That one's for the utilities. Power, gas, internet, they'll all be disconnected by 9 a.m. tomorrow. Trent scoffed, waving the paper. You're kidding. Elaine reached for the gravy boat, poured carefully over her slice of chicken. I'm not. Ashley was already rising from the table, voice climbing. You can't throw us out. We live here. Elaine didn't look up. You've been guests, unpaying ones. The house is mine, legally. You'll find everything in compliance. Carla made sure of it. Trent pushed his plate away, still holding the notice like it was a joke written in a foreign language. You wouldn't. You need us. Elaine finally met his eyes. I never did. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, like drywall settling under too much weight. Ashley exploded first. You're out of your mind. Do you even hear yourself? We have nowhere to go. Elaine stood slowly, taking her plate with her. I heard you both just fine. Every day. Ashley's voice cracked. You're senile. Elaine placed her dish in the sink. I'm finally lucid. Trent's face had shifted from amusement to something else, an undercurrent of panic barely masked by bluster. Is this because of that dumb party joke? Elaine didn't answer. Ashley turned to him, wild-eyed. She's serious. Elaine wiped her hands on a towel and walked to the front hall. She returned holding a small metal box, the same one she'd kept their spare keys in since 1984. Without a word, she opened it and removed the two labeled T and A, house keys. She placed them gently in the middle of the table. Ashley's breath caught. You can't, she whispered. You can't. Elaine tilted her head. You're both trespassing as of tomorrow. She left the room as Ashley stood there shaking, as Trent's thumbs began tapping rapidly into his phone. Searching, calling, Googling, can a parent evict an adult child? But even his voice cracked when he tried to raise it. Elaine walked out onto the back deck. The sun had just slipped below the tree line, casting the yard in dusky orange. Murphy padded out behind her, tail wagging gently. She bent down, gave him one last pat on the head. Sorry, buddy, she murmured. This isn't your fault. Behind her, inside the house, the volume was rising. Ashley yelling, Trent pacing. Elaine sipped her tea and stared into the fading sky, because the storm was finally coming, and she was no longer the one caught in it. Monday began with a bang. Not literal, though the way Ashley slammed cabinet doors at 7:13 a.m. came close. Elaine, dressed in her soft slate cardigan and slacks, calmly sipped her coffee at the breakfast nook as Ashley stalked from room to room, barefoot and furious, a Bluetooth earpiece jammed in one ear. I don't care what the statute says, Mark, she snapped into the air. It's her house, but we have residency rights. There has to be something, squatter's clause, tenant protection, whatever. She paused, listened, then barked, Are you even a real lawyer? Elaine gently stirred in a splash of oat milk. In the living room, Trent sat hunched over his laptop, eyes darting between search tabs like he was cramming for a final exam. She didn't give us 60 days. Isn't that the rule? He muttered. Wait, unless we're licensees? Ashley stormed in. We should have made her put us on the title. I told you. Elaine stood, rinsed her mug in the sink, and moved toward the hallway. Just as she reached the front door, the moving truck rolled up the drive. Right on time. Two of the same movers from Friday hopped out, offering polite nods as they walked past the open-mouthed couple. Elaine handed them her neatly labeled checklist. Just the last few boxes from the upstairs closet and the sewing room, she said. Storage address is still the same. Ashley whirled. What the hell is happening? Elaine didn't answer. She didn't have to. Moments later, the doorbell rang. Darla breezed in, wearing oversized sunglasses, blazer slung over one shoulder like a cape. Morning, sunshine, she sang toward Elaine. Buyers en route, let's do the walkthrough before things get too emotionally complicated. Trent shot to his feet. Wait! This is a sale! You sold the house? Elaine walked to the side table, picked up the silver keyring, just 2 keys now, one marked V302, the other V304, and dropped them into her purse with a soft clink. "I thought you were just kicking us out," Trent said, voice cracking. "I didn't think you were actually—" Ashley's scream cut through the foyer. "This was supposed to be our future!" A wineglass sailed from her hand and smashed against the kitchen backsplash, the red, stemless kind Elaine had bought on clearance after Lexi's 8th birthday. It shattered spectacularly. Darla didn't flinch. "Charming." Elaine turned and walked past them both. "I left the pet records for Murphy on the counter," she said quietly, her voice steel under satin. "The vet information's taped to his crate." She didn't wait for their replies. As she stepped outside, the late morning sun warmed her face. The movers rolled the last dolly down the driveway behind her. A breeze kicked up from the east, carrying the faint scent of jacaranda. Darla followed her out. "Transfer's already cleared," she said. "Funds hit this morning." Elaine reached into her purse, pulled out a small envelope, and handed it over. Darla opened it. 2 address cards. One, Ventura Coastview Condos, Unit 302. The other, Ventura Coastview Condos, Unit 304. Darla's brows lifted. 2? Elaine smiled, soft but deliberate. "Lexi will need space. Not now. Someday." Darla whistled low. "You play long game." Elaine gave a small shrug. "I've had a long life." Behind them, the new buyers, a quiet couple in their 50s, pulled into the driveway in a silver SUV. The husband got out holding a clipboard. The wife waved warmly at Elaine. They hadn't asked many questions during the offer process, just cash, clean papers, and speed. Exactly what she needed. Elaine turned back to look at the porch one last time. Trent stood there barefoot, his hands limp at his sides, watching with stunned disbelief. Ashley was behind him, pacing with her phone, still yelling into static. Elaine didn't wave. She opened the car door, slid in, and started the engine. The driveway was no longer hers, but the road ahead was wide open. As she drove away, she didn't check the rearview mirror. She didn't have to, because she'd already made sure Lexi's name was on the mailbox, too. The door clicked shut behind her with a satisfying finality. New hinges, new locks, no memories clinging to the jam. Elaine stood in the foyer of Unit 302, fingers still curled around the keys. Salt air drifted in through the cracked balcony slider, and the sound of distant waves rolled in like breath. She let her purse fall to the floor and walked barefoot across the cool oak planks, the way a person walks into a chapel. The condo wasn't big, but it didn't need to be. 2 bedrooms, open kitchen, clean white walls. No clutter, no voices echoing from upstairs, no slammed cabinet doors. The movers had already dropped off the first load, boxes labeled Lennon's, Ventura, Kitchen, Keep, and one carefully taped bin marked Lexi's things in her granddaughter's loopy handwriting. Elaine opened the blinds in the living room, flooding the space with golden morning light. From the balcony she could see the ocean glinting like folded steel beneath the sky. Down below, someone was walking a golden retriever along the sidewalk. She waved. They waved back. She was alone, but not lonely. Lexi arrived just after noon. She stepped into the new condo with wide eyes, her ponytail swaying as she took it all in. "Whoa," she said. "It smells like cedar and lemon and peace." Elaine laughed. "That's the candle, and a little bit of my freedom." Lexi wandered toward the second bedroom, stopping when she noticed the small sign on the door, "For whenever you want." She glanced back at Elaine, blinking. "Is this mine?" Elaine nodded. "If you want it. No pressure, no rent. Just space inside." The room was already half prepared. A twin bed with a pale blue quilt, a corkboard with tacks ready for photos, a desk with a small lamp and a drawer labeled "Secrets Welcome" in neat cursive. Lexi stood in the doorway, jaw working like she might cry. But she didn't. Not yet. Elaine watched her from the hallway. "I should have done all this sooner," she said. "I waited too long. I thought protecting Trent meant protecting the family, but I was really just protecting the idea of one." Lexi turned. "You didn't wait too long. You made it out." Elaine sat on the edge of the bed and patted the spot beside her. "Want the full story?" Lexi sat. Elaine told her everything. The eviction, the utility shutoff, the closing papers, the keys. Lexi didn't flinch, just listened with wide eyes and the occasional sharp exhale. When she finished, there was a long pause. Then Lexi said, "I've been waiting for you to stop letting him stomp on you." Elaine reached for her hand. "I didn't know how. Not until it was almost too late." "But it wasn't," Lexi whispered. "You timed it just right." That evening, Elaine stood on the small step stool in the living room, reaching up to hang the last framed piece on the wall. Her friend Monica, widowed 3 years now and recently obsessed with Pilates and DIY projects, held the level and offered unsolicited advice. "Half an inch to the right. No, you're right." Elaine adjusted. The print settled into place. Bold brush strokes in black and coral, with white lettering across the middle that read, "Not your problem anymore." Monica whistled. "Damn, subtle." Elaine climbed down, chuckling. Trent would call it passive-aggressive. "Well," Monica said, tapping the frame with a perfectly manicured nail, "he'd finally be right about something." Elaine grinned and took a step back to admire it. Later, as Monica left with promises of wine and patio chairs next weekend, Elaine returned to her desk and opened the fireproof box she'd carried in herself. Inside was her updated will. The original one had named Trent and Lexi as equal beneficiaries. She pulled it out, drew a line through Trent's name with a deliberate hand, and reached for the updated version Carla had mailed last week. She placed it neatly on top. Lexi. 100%. She tucked the box away, turned off the light, and let the condo fall into soft shadows. From the balcony, the ocean whispered against the shore. Elaine leaned on the railing, watching the waves and street lamps blink into life one by one. She had no idea what came next: writing group, travel, or maybe nothing at all. And for the first time in her life, nothing at all sounded perfect. Because when you finally lock the right doors behind you, the silence isn't empty. It's yours. The first text came on Tuesday morning. "Heard something wild. BBQ gossip true?" Elaine didn't recognize the number, but the area code matched 3 people who had been eating ribs under her patio umbrella 2 Sundays ago. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. By Friday, 3 more popped up. Then emails. Then a voicemail from one of her old neighbors, Janet, whose signature pie crust had always tasted faintly of resentment. "Elaine, I'm not trying to get in the middle of anything, but people are saying Trent was evicted. Like, formally. Please call me back when you can." Elaine deleted the message with a calm thumb press and returned to her crossword. But the silence didn't hold forever. Word had spread, and like most things passed mouth to mouth in a cul-de-sac, it arrived with distortion, sympathy, and eventually clarity. By the weekend, Elaine ran into her mailman, who tilted his head with a smirk. "Didn't think you had it in you, Ms. Holloway," he said, handing her a package. "Heard you finally did. Some house cleaning." She smiled. Spring came early. Meanwhile, across town, the meltdown had moved digital. Ashley's Facebook wall had become a battleground of exclamation points, cryptic captions, and badly lit selfies with captions like, "Betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from blood," and "Gaslight, gatekeep gray hair." Someone, Lexi suspected it was Trent, had leaked a series of texts and videos, including a blurred screenshot of Elaine handing over the envelopes at dinner. The angle was bad, the lighting worse, but it didn't stop people from weighing in. Comments flowed fast, and not in the direction Ashley wanted. She lived in her mother-in-law's house for 4 years and paid nothing? Wait, is this the "you smell like a problem" guy? This is why I tell my mom every week she's a queen. The fact that Grandma moved out and bought a condo is iconic. One commenter added a gif of someone slamming a courtroom door. Another posted a remix video with dramatic music underlaid with Ashley's screaming. By Monday, Ashley's employer, some boutique PR agency in West Hollywood, issued a formal warning and placed her on leave. Something about reputation risk and client discomfort. Lexi didn't gloat, but she did text Elaine a single popcorn emoji. Messages came in from old family friends. People who had stayed silent through the years of Trent's spiral. People who'd seen too much but said too little. Elaine scrolled through them at night. We always knew he took advantage. We just didn't know how bad it got. Wish I had your courage, Elaine. You've done something sacred, protected your own peace. She didn't reply to most, but she read them all. What surprised her most was the letter from Pastor Rick, who hadn't seen her since Robert's funeral. Sometimes kindness means holding space, and sometimes it means closing the door. Lexi had her own response brewing. One night, while Elaine was fixing dinner, pan-seared salmon and lemon couscous, Lexi sat on the couch, filming a TikTok in low light, the soft sound of waves behind her. She spoke plainly, no filters, no hashtags. My grandma raised my dad on her own. 2 jobs. A roof over our heads she fought like hell to keep. Then my dad grew up and forgot. He mocked her, used her, moved into her house and didn't pay a dime. You know what she did? She sold that house while he was still living in it, moved out, bought her freedom, and gave me a room of my own. She paused, then added, "To the women watching this, don't wait to be worthy of peace. Just take it. My grandma did, and she's my hero." Elaine didn't see it until 2 days later. By then, it had over 600,000 views. Lexi handed her the phone. "Sorry, I should have asked." Elaine watched it twice, then again. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. "I thought I was invisible," she said softly. Lexi hugged her from the side, warm and strong. "You were. Now you're the headline." Elaine smiled, eyes glassy, not because she wanted fame, but because the truth had finally come out. And it came with applause. The knock came just after noon on a Wednesday. 3 soft raps, spaced too politely to be a stranger, too unsure to be expected. Elaine glanced up from her open book, spine still creased from where she'd left off. We don't heal in isolation. We heal in connection. She marked the page and rose, her cardigan slipping down over one shoulder. When she opened the door, Trent stood there. He looked small. Not physically. He still had his tall, broad frame, but something in the way he held himself, shoulders slightly rounded, like he hadn't stood up straight in days. In his left hand was a grocery store bouquet, lilies and carnations wrapped in crinkled plastic, a red $6.99 sticker still clinging to the sleeve. Elaine didn't speak. She just stepped aside and gestured him in. Trent cleared his throat. "Hi. Hi." The condo was quiet, as always. Waves murmured behind the balcony glass, a pot of mint tea steeping on the kitchen counter. Trent moved slowly, placing the bouquet on the edge of the dining table. He didn't sit. Elaine remained standing too, arms gently crossed. "Lexi's not here." "I know," he said quickly. "I didn't come to see her." A long pause. "I was angry," he began. "What I said, what I did, hell, what I didn't do. I know I've been hard to live with. Ungrateful." Elaine tilted her head slightly. Still silent. "I messed up. It wasn't fair. Any of it." His voice cracked for a second, and he looked down, adjusting the sleeve of his sweatshirt like it was the only thing keeping him tethered. "I didn't think you'd actually go through with it. That's on me." Elaine moved to the sink, poured a cup of tea, and held it between her palms. "I wasn't trying to prove a point." "I know," he said. "You were saving yourself." Another pause. He glanced around the room, the clean lines, the tidy shelves, the art print above the couch that said, "Not your problem anymore," in soft pinks and rust. Trent gave a sad little, smile. "Yeah, I got the message." Elaine's voice was quiet but firm. "It wasn't just the party." "I know." "It wasn't even the joke." Trent nodded. "It was everything before it. Everything I let become normal." Elaine took a sip of tea. "You taught me something, Trent." He looked up. "You taught me to stop rescuing you." His mouth parted slightly as if to object, but nothing came out. Instead, he just nodded again, once, sharply. After a moment, he said, "So, what now?" Elaine's answer came without hesitation. "Now, you start over." She walked past him and opened the door. "Like I did." Trent stood there for a beat, eyes darting from the bouquet to her, then to the open doorway. He didn't argue, didn't plead. He just nodded one final time, stepped outside, and paused on the welcome mat. The hallway outside was silent. Elaine watched him hesitate for a breath, then turn and walk toward the elevator without looking back. She closed the door gently behind him. Later that night, Elaine found the bouquet still on the table. She unwrapped it carefully, snipped the stems, and arranged it in a mason jar she pulled from the back of a cabinet. She placed it on the small table by the window, somewhere it could catch the light but not take up space. Not forgiveness, not reunion, just proof that even weeds can try to grow in the right direction. She stood back, stared at it for a long while, then picked up her pen and wrote, "Today my son came home. Not to stay, just to finally leave right." Elaine had never been one for journaling. She'd kept grocery lists, utility logs, even a few scrawled poems during Robert's hospital stays, but never a journal. Too indulgent, she'd thought, too much looking backward. Now, sitting in the soft morning light of her condo, the sea murmuring behind double-paned glass, she understood it wasn't indulgence, it was record-keeping. She opened the fresh, linen-bound notebook Lexi had given her, to write what they won't believe you survived. The first page was blank, so was the second, but on the third, in her neat handwriting, she began, "Dear me, age 45, I know you're tired. I know you're folding other people's clothes at midnight and leaving your own in a basket for weeks. I know your mammogram got rescheduled 3 times and you won't say why. You think you're holding everything together, but no one is asking you to, and the ones who should help, they already know you won't ask. Start asking, or start letting go. You're allowed to be the main character of your own story." She stared at the words for a long time, her hand trembling slightly over the page. Then she flipped 2 more pages forward and wrote, "Dear me, age 60. You still think there's time. You're still waiting for him to turn around, say thank you, stop needing and start giving. He won't. But Lexi's watching. She learns how to love herself by watching how you let people love or hurt you. Make sure you're teaching the right lesson." That afternoon, she pinned the letters to her corkboard under the heading, "Legacy, Not Luggage." The sea breeze blew the edges slightly. She didn't smooth them down. Instead, she opened her laptop and clicked the saved tab for flights to Rome, spring 2026. A single-way itinerary stared back at her. She smiled. Lexi had never been abroad. "Too expensive," she'd said when Elaine first floated the idea. "Too selfish, too soon." Elaine was done with too late. She clicked, "Hold my seat." A few evenings later, Elaine was making linguine with garlic oil when Lexi arrived with a printout folded 4 times over. "College essay," she said, dropping the stack on the kitchen counter. "Final draft. Thought maybe you'd want to read it before I hit submit." Elaine wiped her hands and sat on the bar stool. She unfolded the pages carefully, smoothing them flat with both palms. The title hit her like a heartbeat. "My Grandmother, the Quiet Hurricane." She read it slowly, every word. Lexi wrote of her strength in passive moments, the kind of steel that bends without breaking. She described how Elaine taught her to hold silence like a blade, to walk away without apology, to reclaim space not with fists, but with finality. The closing line, "She didn't just teach me how to set boundaries, she showed me how to rebuild a home with them." Elaine didn't realize she was crying until Lexi reached across and gently took the essay from her hands. "Hey," Lexi said softly, alarmed. "Is it too much? I can change it." Elaine shook her head, eyes brimming, lips parting in a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "No," she whispered, "it's perfect." They sat together on the couch, the paper between them like a shared flame. Outside, the sky faded from lavender to navy, the moon a sliver of silver above the palms. Elaine looked at her granddaughter, sharp, warm, unbent, and knew she hadn't just saved herself. She'd broken the pattern, and for the first time in years, she let the tears fall without shame. The email came on. A Monday morning, subject line blunt and clinical. Holloway Trust. Challenge resolution. Elaine opened it slowly, the way you peel back gauze on a wound you already know has healed. The sender was Carla, her estate attorney. Attached was a short PDF and a message that read, "Elaine, no action required on your part. Challenge dismissed. Trust clause held. He'll receive notice of fees due this week. Let me know if you want to block future filings. C. Elaine clicked open the attachment. A motion stamped denied in firm red. Beneath it, a clerk's signature, 2 paragraphs outlining the rejection. The language was clear. The trust was airtight, her no-contest clause enforceable, her actions legal and unassailable. Trent had tried to claw something back, and the door had slammed in his face. She sat back, breath catching not in surprise, but in final confirmation. She'd spent so many years hedging against guilt. Now all she felt was a crisp sort of quiet, like winter air before the first snowfall. The kettle clicked off behind her. She poured tea into the same mug she'd used the day she signed the sale, black with a chipped handle, familiar and whole. Lexi wandered in from the balcony, still in pajama pants, her laptop tucked under one arm. "You look like you just beat a boss level." Elaine turned the screen toward her. Lexi read the subject line, scanned the document. "Oh my God," she said flatly, "he actually tried to sue you?" Elaine nodded. Lexi scoffed. "He never learns." Elaine took a slow sip of tea, then smiled, soft and unbothered. "Some people," she said, "fall in love with the fall." Lexi dropped onto the couch muttering, more like face-planting into a lesson. Elaine stood and walked to her desk, opened the drawer that housed her financial records. She pulled out a stamped envelope she'd prepared weeks ago, just in case, and slid a folded check inside. Payable to the Harbor Foundation, Advocacy for Abused and Exploited Elders, amount $2,000, memo, in honor of anonymous strength. She wrote Trent Holloway on the donation certificate field, unsigned. It wasn't about spite. She'd spent too many years wasting energy on anger. This was about transmutation, turning what had been taken from her into something useful, something bigger than one man's bitterness. She sealed the envelope. That night, she and Lexi made dinner together, shrimp risotto and roasted zucchini, the kind of meal Elaine had once saved for holidays. They ate barefoot on the balcony, a single candle between them flickering in the breeze. "Will you tell him?" Lexi asked, spearing a shrimp. "No need," Elaine replied. "It'll show up on his tax letter." Lexi grinned. "Petty." Elaine raised a brow. "Purposeful." The sea was calm, the stars dusting the sky like powdered sugar. Lexi leaned back in her chair, full and sleepy. Elaine turned her face toward the breeze. For the first time in decades, she had nothing to prove. No one left to please. No debts unspoken. No rooms held hostage by guilt. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in salt and night and peace. Because survival wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of ownership. The Craigslist ad had described it as a quaint artist's bungalow. Technically true, if you were generous and half-blind. Trent stood in the middle of his new room, surrounded by boxes that weren't fully his, inhaling the faint scent of incense, takeout, and someone else's detergent. The hardwood floor creaked with every step. A mattress, no bed frame, was already on the floor, his suitcases stacked against the closet door like stubborn shame. His new roommates were 2 20-somethings. One taught yoga part-time, the other worked at a vape shop and wrote screenplays at night. They barely looked up when he introduced himself. No one cared who he used to be, only that he paid first and last month's rent in cash. He did. Barely. The money left in his account wouldn't last another month. Ashley had left 2 weeks earlier. "Your mess, your fallout," she said, zipping up her duffel while Murphy whined from the corner. "You're really taking the dog?" he asked, disbelieving. Ashley didn't even look at him. "He deserves structure, something you're allergic to." She moved back in with her parents in Santa Clarita, posting inspirational quotes to Instagram and cropping Trent out of every old photo. The last thing she texted him was a screenshot of a legal document. No shared assets. No claim to Elaine's trust. Don't contact me unless it's about the dog. By early October, Trent had begun attending therapy. Sliding scale once a week in the back room of a community center that smelled like recycled books and old carpeting. The therapist, a man in his 50s with an open face and a weary kindness, asked him questions Trent didn't have answers to yet. "Where do you feel resentment lives in your body?" What did you learn about apology from your father? Who were you before your mother stopped saving you? Sometimes, Trent stared at the ceiling the whole session. Sometimes he cried. Once he laughed at a memory and then didn't speak for the next 10 minutes. It was slow, slower than he wanted. But he kept going. Lexi didn't expect to see him at the store. It was a Saturday afternoon. She was grabbing oat milk and peanut butter, and there he was near the freezer aisle, squinting at a coupon clipped to a frozen pizza box. He looked different. Not unkempt, but reduced. His hair was longer, his clothes were loose in places they hadn't used to be, and his posture, once inflated by entitlement, had deflated into something cautious. He looked up, caught her gaze. They both froze. Lexi's first instinct was to keep walking, but she didn't. Trent didn't say anything, didn't try to bridge the space. He just nodded once, barely perceptible. Lexi returned the nod, and that was it. A full history exchanged in silence, no receipts needed. Elaine was chopping rosemary when Lexi told her about it. He looked quiet, Lexi said. Not angry, not smug, just like someone finally heard themselves think. Elaine paused mid-slice. Did he say anything? No. Elaine nodded and resumed chopping, the knife rhythmic and steady. That was enough. She didn't need a breakdown or a thank you or a scene. She needed distance. She needed the version of him that left people untouched. Later that night, Elaine pulled down the shades and lit her eucalyptus candle. She sat at her desk, pulled out a fresh page in her journal, and wrote just one line. Sometimes the loudest healing is silence that finally stays quiet. Outside, the ocean exhaled against the sand. Inside, Elaine didn't need to. Not anymore. The package came in brown paper, hand-addressed in blocky, careful letters. Elaine saw it when she stepped off the elevator, a small square box waiting at her doorstep, no return address. She turned it over once, twice. No postage barcode, no carrier sticker. Hand-delivered. Inside, beneath 2 layers of tissue paper, were fragments of the past. A faded Polaroid, Trent at 5 years old, covered in chocolate cake, gap-toothed and triumphant. A paper turkey handprint from 2nd grade, a birthday card signed in slanted crayon, "Best Mom Forever, Love T." And at the bottom, folded in thirds, was a lined piece of notebook paper. Just one sentence. "I'm sorry." No signature. Elaine stood in her kitchen, the afternoon sun cutting low across the tile, and let the weight of it settle. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. Instead, she opened the drawer beneath the toaster, the one labeled keepsakes in her own hand, and placed the items gently inside. Not forgotten, just filed. She closed the drawer softly and turned to the stove. Dinner tonight was for herself. Seared scallops, lemon orzo, and fresh thyme she'd clipped from the tiny balcony pot garden Lexi helped her start. She cooked slowly, barefoot, sipping chilled Pinot Grigio between stirs. No rush, no portioning for someone else, no double-checking if someone was hungry. She plated it with care, set the table for one, ate by candlelight without distraction. No podcasts, no music, just the sound of silverware and breath, wind brushing against the glass, a seagull crying somewhere out over the surf. The house was quiet, but never lonely. The next morning, she met with the editor. He wore corduroy and round glasses, the kind of man who knew the difference between memory and memoir. They sat on the outdoor patio of a local cafe, her manuscript between them in a neat 3-ring binder. He flipped through the opening pages again. "You don't hold back," he said. "But you don't seek revenge either." Elaine stirred her coffee. "I didn't write it to hurt anyone." "No," he said. "You wrote it to witness." She nodded. "That's all I ever wanted." The working title was penciled at the top of the binder in clean block letters. "Not your problem anymore. Notes on leaving quietly and completely." The editor tapped the words, smiling. "This is going to land in people's chests like a flare." Elaine smiled. "Then I hope it burns clean." That evening she opened the balcony door wide. The breeze moved through the condo like a blessing. Cool, soft, salt-sweet. She lit her eucalyptus candle and let its scent stretch into every corner of the room. It mixed with the lavender soap from her dish rack, the citrus oil she dabbed on her wrists in the morning. Peace didn't have a single scent, she decided. It was layered, earned, alive. She sat at her desk, pulling a fresh journal page from her drawer, and wrote slowly, "When you stop being afraid of being alone, you start building the home you always deserved." She looked up at the wall, at the framed print still hanging above the sofa. Not your problem anymore. It didn't sting to read it anymore. It didn't even feel like defiance. Now it just felt like fact. She closed the notebook, rose to her feet, and moved toward the window. Outside, the tide had begun to rise. Inside, she finally knew what it meant to stay. The stage lights were soft and amber, casting long shadows across the rows of filled chairs. The air buzzed with low murmurs and the gentle hum of an overhead projector. Elaine stood just off stage, palms resting against her slacks, not to steady herself, but to ground herself. A voice announced her, "Elaine Holloway, author, advocate, and keynote speaker at this year's Elder Empowerment Conference. Please welcome her with warmth." Applause, first polite, then rising, not roaring, not wild, but warm, full, like the sound of a room that knows. Elaine stepped onto the stage with unhurried grace. No notes, no podium barrier, just the microphone and the soft thud of her flats against hardwood. She looked out at the sea of faces, some young, some old, some tearful already. She took a breath, and then, "Someone once said I smelled like a problem." Pause, a few chuckles, hesitant and unsure. "I was." Silence sharpened. She continued, voice even and clear. "I was a problem for a family dynamic that fed on silence, a problem for the version of motherhood that demanded endurance instead of boundaries, a problem for anyone who believed age should equal invisibility." She scanned the room slowly, eyes gentle but unflinching. "And like most problems, I solved myself." She spoke for 23 minutes, about guilt and complicity, about the poison of just putting up with it, about how leaving quietly didn't mean surrender. Sometimes, she said, it was the loudest act of defiance. She told them how she learned to unlove the unloving, how she learned to leave the door open for her granddaughter, but not for ghosts, and how healing wasn't neat or quick, but it was hers. When she finished, the applause didn't come all at once. It built, steady and rising, like a tide against the shore. Flash montage. Lexi sat curled on Elaine's old porch swing, now relocated to the condo balcony, her knees tucked under her, rereading the final pages of Elaine's manuscript. A red pen lay untouched beside her. No edits needed. Elaine, alone at a beach cafe, sipped coffee as seagulls wheeled overhead. Her silver hair blew loose in the wind. She smiled at something unwritten. Across town, inside a fluorescent-lit grocery store, Trent stood at register 4, sliding boxed cereal across a scanner. A small TV mounted in the corner played the noon news, muted, but with closed captions flickering. A segment titled, "From Discarded to Defiant, One Woman's Story of Reclamation." A freeze frame of Elaine at the podium, that same calm, that same cardigan. Trent glanced up, watched the screen. He didn't move, didn't blink, just watched. As the image faded to a commercial, he turned back to the next customer. Said nothing. That night, in her condo, Elaine sat at her desk beneath the soft glow of a desk lamp. The air smelled of eucalyptus and open windows. She opened her laptop, scrolled down to the final page of her manuscript. Her fingers hovered for only a second before typing, "I dropped what needed dropping." Pause. And held what deserved holding. She clicked save, closed the file, and for the first time in a long, long life, she was finished.